banks, tufts of rushes and iris. In the background, a weeping willow and other trees. An arched footbridge, painted green. In the valley of the Seine River near Vernon, the painter Claude Monet discovers the village of Giverny. There he rents the house known as the Cider Press. At 43, Monet already has an important body of work behind him. In 1889, he gives a joint exhibition with the sculptor Auguste Rodin. His paintings sell extremely well, and he becomes prosperous. In 1890, he purchases the Giverny house, where he lives with Alice Auchédé, the wife of one of his first patrons. They get married some years later. Monet will live in Giverny for 43 years until his death in 1926. The painter has greenhouses and studios built in the garden, invents original floral composition, which he later uses as pictorial motifs. In 1893, Monet begins to transform the southern part of the garden between the railway line, today replaced by a street, and the Rue, a branch of the Epte River. He has a small pond dug there, regulated by water gates, and a wooden footbridge built over it, no doubt inspired by Japanese engravings. Between 1896 and 1916, Monet purchases additional plots of land. Having received permission to divert the course of the Rue, is able to enlarge the pond. The Rue now crosses the property, winding around the water garden, whose paths provide a variety of different outlooks. Willows, alders, rhododendrons, reeds, and bamboo form a rich range of greens during the summer months. On the pond itself grow white water lilies, Nymphaea alba, yellow pond lilies, and a variety of multicolored hybrids invented at the time by horticulturists. These perennial aquatic plants are rooted in the bottom of the pond and have large floating leaves. Monet has the bridge covered with arches of wisteria, reminiscent perhaps of the Japanese engravings he collects. These engravings, which reached Europe around 1860, fascinate the Impressionists by their formal innovations. Many of these engravings are printed as a series. The painter Hokusai, who died in 1849, made 100 prints of Mount Fuji from a variety of different points of view. Monet owns several of his engravings. At the end of the 18th century, in Rome, Henri-Pierre de Valenciennes, a Frenchman, paints the same landscape several times over, with variations in the lighting and the weather conditions. As early as 1840, one of the first photographers, William Fox Talbot, uses the motif of a haystack to demonstrate variations of sunlight. 18 years before the invention of the cinema, Monet shows the arrival of a train at the Saint-Lazare station in two paintings. In the boat series, Painted in 1887, the subject is off-center or else shown only in part. It is the spectator's task to reconstitute the whole. Monet begins to paint haystacks at the end of the summer of 1890. With this geometric form as the point of departure, it plays on the seasonal evolution of the textures: earth, grass, straw, snow, and above all, on the shifting of the frame. Of poplars along the Havre River, which Monet studies the following year, serve as the pretext for a great number of variations in the range of colors: the reflections on the water, the contrast between the curve of riverbanks and the verticality of the trees, and the geometrization of the space. In the series on the branch of the Seine River near Giverny, Monet chooses a single framework to show the evolution of colors and outlines according to the changes in the light and the seasons. He uses this same principle in his paintings of London and Venice in the first years of the century. In the Rouen Cathedral series painted in 1892 and 1893, Monet tries to capture the slightest metamorphosis of the light. With his easel set up in front of the three different windows in houses facing the cathedral, he works on several paintings at a time, going from one to the other, coming back to them day after day, and continuing to work on them long after he returns to his studio.
I have become slow in my work to a point that drives me to despair. But the more I advance, the more I realize how hard I must work to produce what I'm looking for. Instantaneousness, especially the outer envelope. The same light spreading over everything. More than ever, I am disgusted with the easy results that come from a first try.
After 1890, Monet begins to use the word series. It is under this title that he exhibits the major part of his work. The theme of the Japanese bridge is approached for the first time in 1895, 2 years after the footbridge was built. The first canvases show the small pond in the foreground and the bridge in the background, seen from east to west. In 1899, Monet begins a new series of paintings, this time the bridge viewed from the pond outlet. The format is close to a 90 centimeter square, varying slightly from one canvas to another. The frame has narrowed, cutting off the two ends of the bridge. Only 4 out of the 7 banisters are visible. Since no major differences in the perspectives of these banisters can be seen, we can conclude that the painter always stood in the same place. 2 photographs taken at the time along the center line of the pond show the sort of open-air studio which Monet had set up, and the view he had from that spot. Today we can see on the banks of the pond the very place where he stood. In 1900, Monet begins a new series. The frame has shifted to the left, with more space given to the rushes and irises. The footbridge is no longer shown symmetrically. Several canvases show a path along the edge of the water and an opening to the sky. All the paintings from 1899 and 1900 are entitled The Water Lily Pond, occasionally subtitled Harmony in Green or Harmony in Pink. In 1905, after the widening of the pond, Monet paints a small series of 3 water lily ponds. The bridge is seen from a greater distance, from the far edge of the pond. One of the canvases is used by Sacha Guitry in a theater decor. We do not know what has become of the 3 paintings today. Monet does not come back to the theme of the bridge until 1918, using rectangular formats of slightly over 1 meter by 2. In the meantime, the footbridge has been covered with arches of wisteria. The point of view is the same as in the 1899 series, but a willow has grown in the foreground on the right. Lastly, between 1919 and 1924, Monet uses the bridge again in a nearly square format. The colors are violent, often transposed. The paintings are called the Japanese bridge. Of the 47 water lily ponds and Japanese bridges accounted for in Daniel Wildenstein's catalogue, 24 are presently in public museums, 21 are in private collections, and 2 have disappeared, such as this canvas, photographed in September 1900 in Monet's studio. In contrast to painters of preceding generations, the Impressionists reinforced the clarity and the luminous tonal harmony of their paintings by the use of light-colored grounds. Priming the canvas only once allows them the granular surface against which the stroke of color is able to firmly adhere. In the tube of paint at the time, poppy seed oil often replaces linseed oil, which tends to cause a yellowing of the pigments. Poppy seed oil gives a creamier texture to paints and retains the imprint of the brushstroke. Since it dries more slowly, it is easier to work on when fresh or for touching up. But this indispensable oil also has its inconveniences. A floor, for example, seems darker when it is wet, because the molecules of water allow the light to penetrate deeper into the layers of matter. The light reflected towards the eye is therefore more saturated with color. Similarly, a pigment is darker and more saturated with color when it is steeped in oil. In order to obtain matted and clear tints close to pastels, Degas and Monet eliminate part of the oil by placing the colors on sheets of blotting paper. They then dilute the colors with turpentine, which evaporates quickly. For the same reasons, finished canvases are never varnished.
As for the colors I use, is it really so interesting as all that? I don't think so, considering that more luminous and better results can be obtained with a completely different palette. The important thing is to know how to use colors. Choosing them is really just a question of habit. In short, I use white lead, cadmium yellow, vermilion, deep madder red, cobalt blue, emerald green, and that's all.
The Water Lily Pond series centers around the 4 elements of the scenery: the bridge, the foliage, the water, and the water lilies. Bridges abound in Monet's paintings. During the Belle Époque, bridges are often the symbol of industry's conquest. From earliest times, the bridge has represented social ties and communication. It is the link between places and men, the passageway from one country to another, from one life to another. The bridge at Giverny, which has a purely decorative function in Monet's garden, becomes the main subject of the paintings. It separates the canvas into 2 areas, contrasting its hard manufactured textures with the softer, more malleable textures of the rest of the scenery. Flowers and vegetal elements provide Monet with forms which are highly organized due to their naturally rigorous evolution, but are also subject to the chance whims of the wind and the play of shifting light. Their heavy mobile mass evokes the fluidity of matter, the constant metamorphosis of forms, the passing of time. Water itself is without form. Sometimes it is a pure mirror reflecting the moving masses of foliage or of clouds, which are also mobile and malleable. Reflection intensifies the image, echoes it by blurring, and transforms precise shapes into flat areas of color. This is one of Monet's main themes. 3 plants serve to link the aerial mobile world of foliage and the dense world of stagnant waters: rushes, irises, and water lilies. All 3 are rooted in soil and grow only in aquatic environments. All 3 have mythological origins. The water lily, or nénuphar, takes its name from the ancient Egyptian Nanufar, the beautiful. The flower, which opens in the morning and closes in the evening, symbolizes the birth of the universe out of water. In modern times, the word nénuphar has a somewhat lugubrious connotation. In the romantic poetry of Théophile Gautier or Victor Hugo, it is associated with death. Mallarmé restores it to the light of day. For reasons unknown to us, Monet abandons the usual flower name of nénuphar and substitutes the more scientific term of a subspecies of nénuphar, the water nymph or nymphia. Because of Monet, this is the word that is most used today in French. Nymphs were divinities of clear water, springs and fountains. One of the nymphs drowned herself for love of Hercules and came back in the form of a flower which floated on water. Irises and water lilies are frequent motifs in the decorative art of the period, but Monet uses them in a completely different way. According to whether the flower is dry or wet, the leaf of the water lily, reflecting the sky, is successively green, blue, grey or silver. Of all the scenic elements, it is the one whose colors and textures are most subject to metamorphosis. Despite the obvious desire to abandon the rules of classical representation, the water lily ponds are well constructed, with marked symmetry, harmony between the forms, and even perspective. From close up, the forms seem blurred and confused, the colors extremely bright, but from farther away, the forms reassemble and the colors group themselves into a dominant harmony. A modern photograph of the same site, slightly blurred, creates a very similar image. These optical phenomena are the result of a very special use Monet made of many sorts of independent strokes of color. In the painting Harmony in Green, lighter colors can be discerned beneath strokes of bright colors. Monet roughs out the overall composition with lightly colored brushstrokes in order to create a thick texture. Once this texture has dried, he applies strokes of color for the modeling of forms or for the creation of lighting. The falling branches of the willow tree are rendered by long vertical strokes of green, yellow, or blue, between which can be seen the light-colored strokes of the original texture, thick and striated. The foliage of other trees is rendered by flattened, bushy brushstrokes. Between these two zones of color, shades of blue serve to suggest the somber depth of the leaves. The watery part of the canvas contrasts the horizontal brushstrokes of the water lilies and the vertical strokes of the reflection of the water. Flowers are suggested by small strokes of a flattened brush tip. The large horizontal or vertical strokes of the foreground grow progressively smaller towards the far edge of the pond, creating the illusion of distance. The reflection of the bridge, of which only the shaded underside is shown, is rendered by dense strokes of purplish color. In Harmony in Pink, Monet also makes use of mixed strokes in which two colors are lifted off the palette at the same time and spread together onto the canvas. Combining two pigments diminishes their clarity. Juxtaposing two colors, on the other hand, preserves their vividness and creates a different kind of luminosity. The juxtaposition of vermilion and white enables Monet to paint several water lilies with a single brushstroke. On the left, the tuft of rushes is first rendered by a dense texture of red, dark yellow, and deep green lines, which are then given touches of lighter colors. These lighter touches are made either with the tip of the brush in a rapid and thickly coated stroke of a single or occasionally of two light colors, or with the edge of a small palette knife. In the central area and in the patch of water lilies in the foreground, the paint has allowed the light beige ground to appear, thus increasing the clarity of these areas as well as reinforcing their contrasts. For this ground, he has made a large number of dry strokes by dragging his brush across the canvas, thus letting the rather dry pigment run out. The rubbing of the brush against the threads of the canvas forms vertical dotted lines. Lastly, the thickness of the paint in certain parts of the canvas creates reliefs which, by intercepting lateral light sources and creating narrow shadows, add luminous effects to those belonging to the painted surface itself.
When you go outside to paint, try to forget what objects you have in front of you, a tree, a house, a field, whatever. Think only that here you have a small square of blue, a square of pink, a green oval, a yellow stripe, and paint them exactly as they appear to you.
The series of Japanese bridges gives an impression of spontaneity and extreme rapidity, of improvisation. This impression is logical, since what these paintings are attempting to do is to capture the fugitive moment of luminosity. But this apparent rapidity is merely a stratagem, one of the main aspects of Monet's style. In a square of 10 centimeters per side in the central section of Harmony in pink, 23 different colors have been used for 180 surface brushstrokes. If the same proportion is applied to the entire canvas, it amounts to a total of about 15,000 surface brushstrokes. The setting up of textures, the choice and large variety of colors, and their progressive harmonization, the need to let the coats of paint dry for a long time to avoid the blending of fresh pigments, all this proves that Monet could only have painted slowly by stages, according to a carefully thought-out process. As he had done 6 years earlier for the Rouen Cathedral series, Monet had in fact worked simultaneously on the 12 canvases of the 1899 series.
I work on these canvases all day long. They're handed to me one after another. In the air, I rediscover the color that I found yesterday for the first time and tried out on one of the canvases. I'm immediately given the canvas and I try to fix it definitively as quickly as I can. But usually it disappears almost right away and another color takes its place, already painted a few days earlier on another canvas, which I'm quickly brought. And so it goes the whole day long.
The paintings were then reworked in the studio, which Monet had installed on the western side of the house. In the rectangular series of 1919, the brushstrokes are larger, the forms fuzzier, and the light ground is visible along the edges. The composition is treated in a harmony of greens and yellows, with touches of red which produce vivid contrasts. In the last bridge series, Monet returns to the use of a nearly square format, but this time the disintegration of the forms is complete. The brushwork is much larger, dance-like, seemingly chaotic. Some canvases are nearly monochromes. This transformation is attributed to the cataract from which Monet has been suffering since 1908. In 1918, the painter's vision grows much worse. He has to force himself to read the labels on the tubes of paint and to place the colors on his palette the way he used to. It is difficult for him to perceive the outlines of things. Shades of blue have disappeared, filtered out by the yellow-brown opacification of the crystalline lens. In October of 1922, he undergoes an operation on his right eye. He is not very satisfied with the result. Special eyeglasses help him to progress. Suddenly, he is able to perceive shades of color he had not seen for years, in particular blues and purples. A pair of tinted eyeglasses are found which help to restore certain colors. In 1925 and 1926, he considers his sight to have improved. He is now able to look at the production of the preceding years and to judge the result. Although he destroys some of the canvases, he nevertheless chooses to keep some 20 paintings of the Bridge series, as well as canvases belonging to the other series, the Weeping Willow, the Rose Path, and the House Viewed from the Garden.
Whether my cathedrals, my London paintings, and other canvases are painted from nature or not is nobody's business and is of no importance. I know so many painters who work from nature and produce ghastly things.
In 1895, Vasily Kandinsky sees one of Monet's haystacks in Moscow. Suddenly, for the first time in my life, I realized I was looking at true painting. A few years later, Piet Mondrian, fascinated by Monet's haystacks, poplars, and cathedrals, devotes himself to the same subjects and gradually turns his attention to geometrical motifs. As for the principle launched by Monet of working from a series, it can be found in the work of other painters, of certain photographers, and even of sculptors.
I want you to know that I'm absorbed in my work. These landscapes of water and reflections have become an obsession. They're beyond my old man's capacities, but nevertheless I want to succeed at rendering what I feel. I destroy some paintings. I begin others. And I hope that from so much effort, something will emerge.
At the same time as the bridge paintings, the water lily is the main subject of several series of bird's-eye views of the pond. The painter is concerned exclusively with reflections, clouds, transparency, opacity, and colors. Water lilies are also the subject of the panels that Monet paints after 1914 in his new studio. After the armistice of 1918, he decides to offer these panels to the state. In 1921, his friend Georges Clemenceau, who has just withdrawn from politics, offers to house the paintings at the Orangerie in the Tuileries Gardens. After a number of different projects for accommodating the paintings, 2 oval-shaped rooms are built. They are inaugurated in May 1927, 5 months after the painter's death. Carefully outlined, smooth paintings gave the spectator an image of an enclosed, completed, homogeneous world. The Impressionist world, on the other hand, does not consist only of solid objects. It reflects the new scientific consciousness. It disintegrates into corpuscles. It is immersed in a field of waves. It is infinite. It goes beyond its frame. Light imposes a new logic, eliminating forms and transforming the colors of objects and their shadows. Out of this stems Monet's predilection for splashes of color, for reflections and the arbitrary combinations of color they bring about, for strong contrasts, for informal spaces and volumes, smoke, fog, clouds, snow, ice, foliage. The subject of the paintings is pure luminous sensation, emerging out of color. The brushstroke atom draws, sculpts, recomposes it. The light-colored brushstrokes of the magpie contrast the warm and cold light of the snow. The rich strokes of the poppy field recreate the translucid brilliance of the wrinkled petals, the essence of a peaceful summer walk. The dancing strokes of the reflections of impression sunrise show the aquatic outburst of light. The braid-like strokes of haystacks sculpt the reddish gold of tightly packed straw. The thick, dry paint of the cathedrals creates stone and mortar. With the Japanese bridges and with the large panels of the Orangerie, the water lilies become metamorphosis itself. Leaf and flower, earth and water, matter and reflection, shadow and clarity, cold colors and warm colors. Monet's painting has become the dance of the brush and the vibration of light.